Hi. I just want to sort of start off by saying that it's been such a privilege to publish Kinpam's book. Um, you know, when my co-editor and I, Karthika, when we spoke about Kinpam's book, we were saying, what where does it fit as this, what kind of novel is this? And I think the answer that we eventually came to is that this is, it's an oral history, we felt, of the Khasis, but it was much more than that because, it wasn't just like the old oral histories, the mythologies, the origin stories. We felt it was much more than that. It was a lived reality of, so we talk about corruption, we talk about how you name people, we talk about like funny drunk stories, we talk about people fighting among friends, about property disputes, how, inheritance happens. It's like if we started talking about the many themes that the book covers, I think we'd just be sitting here all day. Um, but I mean, it is, I think, the most unusual work that I have worked on and published, and it's really, truly, Kinpam has been a privilege. Um, I want to start by just asking you, who did you think would read a thousand-page novel?
Um, yeah, this is the biggest problem, with planning a book like this. Um, I wanted so much to write about the Khasi people because they have been so much misunderstood and maligned. For example, there are articles published in Femina India. I think it was called "Moms to Word," and where Khasi males, were described as parasites who don't do any work, who live off their wives' earnings. And then there is another article published in Australia called "Where Men Are Breeding Bulls."
Right.
Then um, and this maligning has been there since for a very very long time. Um, Lindsay, for example, the the resident and commissioner of Dhaka, described Khasis as red mouth demon because of the quiet stain on their teeth.
Right.
And so, and even my own people, and when they speak about our own culture, they don't really speak from real knowledge, and some of them, even liken our traditional democratic system to the system practiced by the Taliban.
Right.
So I wanted to, I wanted to make corrections, and I
Right.
was thinking, what to do. Should I write, a scholarly book? But then, who would read a scholarly book? And I have so much information on the Khasi people because I've done a lot of reading on them, and also, because I practice the culture and I practice the religion.
Right.
So, I was casting around for a proper narrative frame. It was at that time that I came across this strange, even for us Khasis, strange funeral rituals of the Lingams, a sub-tribe of the Khasis. It's a 6 day long funeral ceremony. Um, so
And
um,
that's at the heart of the novel
yeah,
because it's what everything is
yeah,
moving towards
yes, yes,
eventually everyone reaching
yeah.
that.
So when I heard about this, I thought of I said, here is a very here is a fitting narrative frame for the novel.
Right. Yeah.
And then I read about I read Giovanni Boccaccio's Decameron. Then I thought about the Arabian Nights, which I had read many years before. So I said, I could use this strange funeral ritual. I could keep it at the center of the action, and then I have so much information. How to present this vast amount of information? How to make it interesting? How to make it appealing to people? How to entice them into reading such a thick book, because I know that if I write about the Khasi people, I want to put the name of the Khasi people up there before the world. But how? So I knew that it was going to be a very thick book, and initially, you remember, I wrote about 1,600 pages, and then we pared it down to
We pared it down over
yeah.
edits to, yeah, about a
So
thousand
yeah.
thousand pages now.
So I thought about three books actually. Giovanni's Giovanni Boccaccio's The Decameron, the Arabian Nights, and Plato's Socratic Dialogues. And in the Decameron, that it's a book of novellas, and the Arabian Nights, it comprises a series of stories. So I thought, I would present the story of the Khasi people through stories, in the form of stories and conversations, because only stories will not do. So I knew that I would have to have conversations and dialogues,
Right.
especially dealing with the weighty issues, weighty contemporary issues that I have to grapple with.
Right.
So I thought about the Socratic dialogues. Why not use the model of the Socratic dialogues to talk about weighty contemporary issues. Because exactly, I knew that it's going to be very difficult for people to read such a thick book. So it must be presented in the form of stories and interesting dialogues. Yeah.
Conversations, yeah. And actually, I mean, the sort of structure of the book is that it's this group of friends and acquaintances who sort of come together, and they're moving towards, they're traveling to attend this funeral
Yeah,
uh, ritual.
the
And
jungle hamlet of
yeah, in
Lingnam,
yeah, in
of
this jungle.
Nongshirkon in
Oh,
the
yes,
Lingnam
exactly. Yeah.
area.
Yeah. And actually, what happens is that through the book, these people are talking to each other and debating various things. And one of the things that did, I mean, for me, I don't know if this is what you were intending to do with it, Kinpam, but one of the things it did for me was that it allowed you to talk about and write about very intimate issues, things that you only discuss within the community. In fact, like throughout the editing process, like I kept thinking, I have to put in this phrase, intimate access to a whole world, like, in the blurb. And I think I managed to sneak it in
Yes,
eventually.
yes, it's quite good.
You took it out and then I put it back in. And to me, it really felt like it was doing that. And it also allowed you to talk about things like outsiders, like fairly political issues, things that are contentious, say, outside the community, which is like this whole political thing of who's an insider, who's an outsider, who can stay here, who cannot, or things like the matrilineal system, which is quite, and that's at the center of actually some very acrimonious fights in the novel. So it allows you also that ability to talk about all these political issues beyond also the cultural, the mythological, and all of that. So what is it like for you to be a, a Khasi in this political climate? How do you sort of function in
Okay,
as an individual now?
before I come to this, um, yeah, it is, it is exactly because I need to put in all this information and grapple with all these contemporary issues that I chose this particular narrative frame,
Right.
yeah, the narrative frames of the Decameron, the Arabian Nights, the
Yeah, yeah.
Socratic dialogue. And also, I took inspiration from what Raymond Williams said about the tradition of realism. He says that I believe in a novel, in a realistic novel which creates and judges the qualities of a whole. I mean, which creates and judges the qualities of a whole way of life through the
Right.
qualities of uh, qualities of a whole range of characters.
Right.
Um, because I need to talk about all of these. So I think you mentioned earlier. You were talking about the Khasi way of life. Um, so there is a question of identity. There is a question of the Khasi physical and spiritual roots, the political and social systems that we practice, and then coming down to the contemporary issues. Like the matrilineal versus patrilineal systems, then the outsider insider issues, which is a very which is a very delicate issue. So um, writing about writing about this particular issue is not very easy because uh, there are two basically there are two points of view. uh, One, for example, which is very nationalistic from the Khasi point of view, very jingoistic, and talking about the great dangers of influx. Um, um, and by the way, Khasis have been talking about the dangers of influx, since the time the British came. Because
Right.
when they came in, they brought along with them, officials and followers, people from all sorts of communities from the rest of India. So that tension, the insider versus outsider tension was there since the time of the British. So there's one position which is very nationalistic, very jingoistic, um, demanding for all sorts of safeguards for the Khasi people. But there is also the other side, which says that, which condemns, this position as narrow-minded and communal and fundamentalist. So, what does a novelist do?
Right.
A novel, to be worth the name of a novel, should not take sides. It cannot be any kind of propaganda
Right.
writing.
Yeah.
So I have to deal a lot with the gray areas. So I have to invent characters, who would reflect the two positions, and the narrator, and then I have to invent a narrator, who is able uh, to to take a middle position and understand both sides of the stories. The story of the tribals and the story of the non-tribals. It's a very it's a very delicate situation. I
It
mean,
is.
for example, um, and because, by the way, the question of influx and its dangers are very real. Okay, uh, so but then, it is easy to understand, the demands for the government, both the union and the state governments, to tackle questions of migration from foreign countries, say from Bangladesh and Nepal and so on. But then, how are the same governments, handle the migration of people from other Indian states? Because the constitution has guaranteed the freedom of movement for all Indian citizens. It's a very, very delicate issue. But then, um, whatever it is,
And not
this is a
one with
very,
easy
yeah.
answers.
Yes,
Yeah.
there are no easy answers. The only thing is, this is a very pressing issue because the question of influx is linked to the other to the other to the other problem that we have here, which is a f- which is a recurring problem, the problem of communal riot. If they don't if they don't do anything about the issue of influx, and take care of both positions in a very sensitive and in a very sensitive manner, um, then I am afraid, that the peace that we have had in Shillong, will not be for a very long time, because there are bound to be tensions which might flare up in other, in riots in few years from now.
And I mean, and this is of course exactly why it was necessary to sort of also use a narrative device that allows you to look at these delicate issues and allow different sort of points of view to come in. But also, I was thinking while we're talking about the novel, if you would read a little bit from the book, um, is
What about?
so
Can you repeat?
I have several favorite stories, but you mentioned like we were talking about the portion that is actually about this venue, right?
Okay, yes.
I mean that is
The
one
name.
possibility if you feel like reading it, or maybe that thing we were talking about earlier, about how so many Khasis don't actually know the history of like a sub tribe that had a history of cannibalism, and
Okay.
so I don't know if that is something you want
Yeah, all right.
one of
You know, this is a question I would like to pose to the audience. How many of you know, the name of this venue? What is the name of this venue, and how many of you know the history of this place? Uh, I promise you that only 1% of the Khasi people, actually know the true story behind this, behind this, behind the place where we are at now. Um, okay, let me. Um, is there anyone who know the history of this place?
apart
Okay,
from
my
Delhi.
Khasi friends are all silent, so apparently they don't know. So let me read a little bit about the history of this place and the name. All right. Um, Let me just try to locate it. It's such a big book that it's even difficult for me, to find out things. All right, here it is. Um, you know the um, the characters are talking about a small lake in Lingnam, and uh, one of the characters said, one of the characters said, referring to the lake in Lingam, she said, um, "This lake must be bigger than Watts Lake in Shillong, yeah?" Magdalene observed. Okay, this is one of the characters, and then there's another character called Bakansai. He says, "That's what Pearlie just said." Then Magdalene, the one who made the first statement, said, uh, he said nan polok. He said nan polok, because mostly this place is known as the Wards Lake to most people, but to many Khasis it is known as nan polok. But mostly we don't know why it is called nan polok, and beyond Pollock, what is the history? So this is about that. Um, then um, then Bakansai says it's the same thing. Pabit means you fool, but Bakansai said it in a playful tone, so Magdalene did not mind at all. Then she says, "Is it Bakansai? I also didn't know that, yeah." Then okay, I'll skip a few lines, and then I'll read on. Uh, then um, then this is um, this is one another one of the characters. He says, Khasis call it Nanpalok because of the Khasis call it Nanpalok because of the engineer. Um, his name was Pollock. He supervised the work of constructing the lake. There's more to the story of Nan Pollock than that, Barkensai. Barkett corrected him. Tell them up. You know the story better than I do. Actually, the history of Nan Pollock goes much farther back than either Ward or Pollock. I began. According to a well known story that was written down for the first time by the Khasi writer W.R. Lightflang, The idea of building a lake was first conceived by a Khasi prisoner from Ripanar. He had been brought to Shillong during the chief commissionership of Colonel Henry Hopkinson. Bored with the idea of prison life, he begged the authorities to allow him some physical exercise. When asked what kind of exercise, he replied, like the farmer he was, that he would like to dig the ground with a hoe. They took him to a field near the present Accountant General's office and let him dig. It was exactly over there, actually. The man began digging a damp piece of ground and carried on as if he were making a paddy field ready. After he had done that for some days, water suddenly gushed out and turned his paddy field into a pool. When the prison authorities came to know about it, they reported the matter to the Chief Commissioner's office. Colonel Hopkinson himself hit upon the idea of enlarging the prisoner's pool into a lake, and work began immediately. When the digging was done in earnest by a large labor force, water was found in more than one place, and thus was born a series of artificial lakes known as Hopkinson's tanks. During the chief commissionership of Sir William Ward, who took a personal interest in the beautification of Shillong, the series of lakes were merged into one big lake. By the way, Ward was the chief commissioner of Assam and not of Khasi in Jaintia Hills. During his time, many other improvements were made, like the construction of a wooden bridge across the lake, the same one you can see today, and footpaths along its banks. All this work was supervised by an executive engineer named Pollock, who also had trees and flowers planted everywhere. That's why, though the lake became officially known as Watts Lake, Khasis decided to give credit to the man who actually did the work and call it Nan Pollock. Unfortunately, and this is actually the point of this story, unfortunately, in the history of Nan Pollock, the name of the Khasi man, the Pnar, whose boredom in prison had led to the creation of this magnificent beauty spot, was lost through sheer negligence and the disdain of everyone involved. So that's the story of this place, Nan Pollock.
But I mean, the thing with this book, of course, is that if every last Khasi forgot the history of the Khasis of the community,
Yeah, even
then
I could not find the name, which is very
yeah,
sad.
it's very sad that you couldn't. But I mean, we do have this record now, and what do you think the response has been from the community? I remember you saying that there was this rock band that like gifted the
Yeah,
book as
yeah. The response has been very has been very inspiring. You were asking me, who would read such such a thick book, but the response has been great actually,
right,
and many orders were placed from me alone, so
right,
I could order directly from the publisher, get my author's discount, and pass on the discount to them.
right,
So many copies were uh, you know um, were ordered through me, and then the bookshops in Shillong have been doing brisk business. And yeah, there was a Khasi rock band, Somersault. Recently they went to Germany, and they decided, to carry a few copies of the book to present the dignitaries that they met in Germany.
right.
And there are also, organizations, students organizations and NGOs. Um, you know, they used to have these felicitation, functions where they felicitate people. And earlier, they used to give them mementos, but this time, instead of mementos, they presented with my book.
How
So the
lovely.
response has
Yeah.
been quite good.
Right. That's
Even in social media, I've seen Khasis, saying
right.
mostly good, only good things, I think, about
Right.
the
That's
book.
it. And I mean, we've had some really like good response in the national press as well. So
Yeah, I've been
certainly
lucky.
that
The
has been
reviews have
very
been
good.
very good. Yeah.
I mean, it's sort of like the other thing that I was thinking about, that this is so rooted in, um, in the Khasi community, and also in a very Khasi sensibility. In what way do you, and but also your own reading is very wide. I mean, um, I'm sorry, am I making this noise?
No.
It's the breeze, I think.
Okay.
I know that your reading is very eclectic, and it's very, I mean, you're very interested in world literature, and and that sort of thing. How do you see the book traveling from the local to the global? How, what do you think the book says to people outside of here?
Yeah, I have had a few reactions from my friends in UK and the US and in Australia, and uh, uh, there's someone who's in Australia, who's teaching there, and she wrote back the other day. She said she said initially, she was intimidated by the size of the book,
Right,
but then she said, she was very happy to find that it's such an easy read and it's actually unputdownable.
right.
So
How
basically,
lovely.
these are the reactions that I'm getting from people outside India. So I was very happy in one way because although this is supposed to be a book about the Khasi people, yet it has transcended uh, um, the local and appeal to the wider world.
There's so many funny stories in the book. Like all these questions that I'm asking you about politics and culture and mythology and all of that. I think that's the point, that there's actually so much fun in the book. And I don't think I've given our audience a sense of that at all. Do you think there's
Okay.
a little story you
Yeah.
can read?
Yeah. All right.
Something to
Yeah.
give people a sense of like how many how much
Yeah.
fun the book is also.
Yeah. All right. Um, the book is divided between between root stories and little stories. The root stories are more serious, although they are also illustrated by examples and stories, big and small. But following the root stories are these little stories. Uh, um, some of them are humorous and but they come with morals and so on. So I'll read one here. That is part of the urban legend about a person called Liao, the miraculous prayers of Liao. Also because Khasis are very fond of prayers, and sometimes before we eat, we pray till the food gets cold.
Okay.
So
Right.
I'll read a little bit about Liao just to see that the book is not all seriousness, and this is part of the urban legend. All right. Um, so the characters are talking about interesting people that they know of in Shillong, Barkansar is talking about a person called Liao. He says there was also a little fellow from Maukar known as Liao, another of those meaningless Khasi nicknames, perhaps given because he was so small, about 4 feet 11 only. Liao was a daily wage laborer, but was well known throughout the locality because of his excessive fondness for praying before meal times, especially when there was a big audience. However, Bakansai clarified he was not a religious person. in the conventional sense, and did not even go to church. But at funerals and feasts, he said, you had to listen to his loud prayers before you could eat. Thankfully, though, his prayers were quite unique and not very long because they directly addressed the issues at hand, the things he could see or could not see on the place. For instance, during a naming ceremony, he and his friends were given a dish of rice and a beautifully prepared beef curry. For dessert, they were given a plate of gulab jamuns, which, as you know, are dark brown sweets, usually the size and shape of golf balls. Looking at the food before him, Liao began his prayer saying, "O Lord, thank you for this plate of rice. Thank you for this tasty looking beef curry. And certainly, thank you for these liang kulai, these horse testicles that I so love to eat. Amen." At another feast, Liao was given a plate of rice and pork curry. But by an oversight, he was served only the gravy, potatoes, and some bay leaves used to flavor the curry. There was not a single piece of meat on his plate, whereas on his friends there were 4 or 5 pieces. When Liao saw, when Liao said his prayer, therefore he began with a loud appeal. "O Lord, I thank you for this plate of rice, and I appeal to you to bless our generous hosts for it. But at the same time, as you turn water into wine, I also fervently pray that you kindly turn these bay leaves on my plate into pork." Hearing that, the red-faced hosts quickly produced a plate full of pork for Liao. And Liao said, "Prayers can work miracles." Once, a friend of Liao's called Knung, because he was so tall and thin, came running to his house in the middle of the night. Knung had recently married the youngest daughter of a wealthy family after long consultations with Liao and his cronies. The hope was that Knung would be very rich, as per the contemporary Khasi practice. The youngest daughter inherits everything. The hope was that Knung would be very rich and the union would bring them great benefits as well. Unfortunately for Knung, his mother-in-law became pregnant again after a gap of many years. The man was in a titsy. What to do, he said to himself. And off he went, running to Liao's in the dead of night. When Liao opened the door, Knung said without preamble, "Golmal bhai, sab golmal. Trouble, big trouble. You have got to help me, man, please." "What happened? Why are you crying?" Liao demanded in a stern voice. "What else can I do? My mother-in-law, man, she is pregnant. Can you believe it? Pregnant at her age. It's shameful, man. But what if she gives birth to a girl? That will be the youngest daughter. No, short of murder, what can I do?" Liao told him to get a grip of himself, on himself. He rubbed the stubble on his chin and asked, "When is she due?" "She just learned about it." "Then maybe it's not too late. Don't despair. We'll organize prayer meetings every day. After all, prayers can move mountains. No. Liao and his friends met at Knung's every day after work and prayed for almost 9 months um, that Knung's mother-in-law must on no account be blessed with a daughter. During these prayer meetings, they abstained from drinking and only indulged afterwards, and that too only a glass or two to wash off the cement dust from the construction site. And believe it or not, after 9 months, Knung's mother-in-law gave birth to a baby boy. Liao's fame as a praying man rose phenomenally among his friends. They never tired of telling the story, and also about what happened to him once during a prayer. They were all sitting together in a building site, their lunches packed in betel nut leaves spread on the ground before them. As usual, Liao closed his eyes and began to pray, but perhaps because he was more hungry than usual, he opened his eyes just as he was about to say Amen. And when he did so, he saw a little chicken shit. He saw a little chicken shit just in front of his jasong. The sight so muddled his thinking that instead of saying Amen, he said, Ah, shit. Only once did Liao refuse to pray. That was during the funeral of a close relative in Sora. Liao had gone there with his usual band of friends, and because they were all construction workers by profession, they were thought to be the fittest people to dig the grave. All morning till about noon, they worked non-stop at the graveyard, digging and generally preparing everything for the burial. When it was done, they sated their thirst with a few drinks. Then, tired and hungry, for they had not eaten anything for hours, they decided to return to the mourning house and not to wait for food to be brought to the graveyard. On arriving, they immediately headed for the kitchen. The woman helping in the kitchen ladled rice and pork broth onto their plates. But in Sora, people usually scooper up their rice in thin slices, like pieces of cake. Thus it was that the woman gave them thin slices of rice and a piece of pork each. That done, she said in a friendly tone, Okay, Baliao, now you can begin your prayer. Tired and hungry, Liao looked sourly at the small helping of rice and the single piece of pork on his plate. Suddenly he lost his cool and shouted, Pray, pray for this measly rice and this tiny piece of pork. You pray, you miserly woman. The woman fled the room in shame and was replaced by another, who immediately ladled more rice and pork onto their plates. Seeing that, one of Liao's friends said, Hey Liao, even refusing to pray can work miracles, huh? Liao had been staring fixedly at the food in front of him, as if trying to make sense of what had just happened. His friend's comment, however, broke the spell. With a low grunt, he said, Let us pray. It was the shortest and most cryptic of all his prayers. He said, O Lord, for this miracle too, we thank you. Amen. Thank you.
We are entirely out of time, and I feel really bad. But is there time for one question, or yeah? So could we take just one question, if there is, from the audience?
It's,
Yeah. Um, can
So I would like to uh, have a clarification with regards to Kapak Sentiu. When I read your book, I was surprised to see that it was quite different from the textbook that the students are reading now, okay, which is prescribed by MBOS. I do not blame that BD Karpran had committed a mistake on that because he also just borrowed from other authors who are non-Khasis. Probably they do not know much about the sources of Kapasentu. So how do we make it this to light? Because most of the facts and informations that is mentioned on in that text are quite wrong. For example, the flower Liu Jalingteng on the textbook it's named as Liu Jalingteng, and then even Kapak Sentiu the spelling is also wrong. I don't know how do we make this to light so that all of us who are from this state and we are if uh, we claim to be the daughters and sons of Kapak Sentiu, how do we know the facts of this? How do we make this to light?
Um, See, as I understand it, you want to know about the name of Pasantir is actually the ancestress of the kings of Shillong, or the kings of the traditional state of Shillong.
right?
The Sames are called kings, but the Hima is not a kingdom; it is a
Yes.
state.
I
Um,
have read your book,
yeah,
so I know.
because of the yeah, just enlightening
I
that.
know, I know.
Um, because of the democratic nature of the
Yes.
Khasi
Yeah.
states.
Yeah.
So the Pasantir is actually means the one lured by flower. She's supposed to be a fairy, but then there's a subterfuge here. And the flower, the name of the flower is Tiu Jalingteng. Is actually it's Tiu Jalingteng, and this is available in many Khasi books as well. Um, and what was the other question?
I think his
Yeah,
question
so
was
that
really like,
basically that.
yeah,
Yeah, okay. Um, so that's it.
right, yeah. So I
So
think
the
we'll have to
cherry
wind up, but do you want to read? Because, we're at the Cherry Blossom Festival, just that
Okay.
one poem. It's really brief.
Can I
Do
do
you?
that? Yeah. All right.
Yeah.
Okay. Towards the end of the novel, the last chapter, the characters are talking about how how they're going to miss the place and the village hamlet of Nongshirkon, since they are about to leave for home. And so one of them talks about. He says, um, uh, the our journey back home, our impending journey back home, and the feelings that we are experiencing remind me of a poem called Life by Kojo Kinaye Ki, a poet from Ghana. He says it's quite beautiful. Life, he says, is the only wayside inn on a rough and tumble safari, and every one of our party stops here overnight. After that, he is only a memory. So this is part of a poem by Key. Then one of the characters, Magdalene, says, "That's very sad, yeah." True, but the last three lines also offer some consolation. Another character replies. Then Donald, another one, says, how, Baap? Then Jutang, the narrator, says, let me answer you with another poem. It's called A Farewell Letter of Cherries. Dear friend, this is a letter of cherries. This is a poem born of cherries and my affection. When the town is pink with their blush, this is a poem born when summer greets winter under a compassionate sky, like two old timers, like you and me, before we go our separate ways. This is a poem born of sadness, for the cherries will yield to a blasé green, and the cold will finally conquer. This is a poem born of consolation, for the business of man is not to possess, and the only part you can keep of things that come and go is that which you have photographed with your mind. Dear brother, we live in our memory, in the memory of the world. Stoking that memory with fondness is all that we can do. We can do no more. We can do no less.